But it can't be, which story is correct? It doesn't make any difference. Both stories are good. We're going to keep both of them. So obviously they can't be both correct. These, and first of all, that's in a part of the Bible that's only myth or stories. But they kept both of them because they thought they were good stories. Okay? So whatever is in the Bible has gone through that process and is finally accepted.
I was just thinking like the Gospel of Peter, could some of those writings or Gospels or letters been rejected because of some of the heresies that were around?
Well,
they might have thought they led into it somehow?
Yeah, there were probably something in the Gospel. Some of them, for example, are quite exaggerated. If you look at, for example, I think it's in the Gospel of St. Thomas, where he tells the story that Jesus, when he was a little child, went to the Sea of Galilee, and then with his hands, he made a little bird, and then flew on the bird. I mean, just blew on the bird and then flew away. Well, obviously,
that's his imagination.
So that's somebody's imagination. So that wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. So it was not accepted. So it's a story that was not validated, or people's experience didn't say that it was real. Okay. Now, one other thing that I know from the last week. Last week I talked to you about the fact that a number of stories in the Bible were not authentic. They are works of fiction, and one of those that I asked you to read was the book of Jonah. Okay, and I hope you read it. But even if you didn't read it, I'm sure you know enough about the book of Jonah to say, why was that in the Bible? Now, what I was doing when I was teaching in Uganda, or even when I was teaching at Walsh, I used to try to, explain a bit some of the discrepancies we see in the Bible. Why sometimes we don't accept this, why this doesn't seem to make sense, why are there some difficulties in accepting what, even to accept the Bible literally. It can't really, in my judgment. Some people still accept the words of the Bible literally, but I don't think it makes sense to do that, okay? But, so I used to tell the students, now, even though I tell you that we really can't, in my judgment, take the Bible literally, this is probably the most important book that was ever written in the world. It's actually, there's in some way the stamp of God's presence. There's something in the Bible that brings the Bible to another level that other books don't have. That, in other words, there was a direct inspiration from God. So there's something in the Bible that is different. However, when you take the story of Jonah in the whale, you can't take it literally. If you try to take it literally, it looks almost like a stupid document. So then why would they have accepted, if it's not true, and it's a ridiculous story, it's maybe even a funny story, but yet it's part of the Bible. So I used to tell them every night, I used to say, all right, tonight, or every time I was studying that story, tonight you go back and you find some reasons why they put this story in the Bible. Tell me some of the reasons why they put this story in the Bible, okay? Now, I asked you to read the stories. I'm going to ask you the same question. Why do they put the story of Jonah in the whale in the Bible as a canonical story? What are some of the reasons?
To teach a lesson.
Yes, to teach a lesson. What lesson?
God's word.
All right. How would you explain that?
Well, he was reluctant in wanting to do it, but the Lord made sure that he did it, and he planted him where he wanted him to be.
Okay, so the Lord's going to help you to carry out his way. Okay, you don't want to follow his way. He might push you a little bit, but he's going to help you also. What else?
They took care of you in spite of being in the whale.
They took
He
care of
saved
you.
you.
So in other words, God is capable of saving you no matter where you are. What else?
God has great mercy and love for all of his creation.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the basic theme of the story. God's love is unconditional.
Right.
God's love is endlessly merciful. There's no sin that's big enough that God is going to forgive him. Not forgive him. What else?
I was, when I read the end of it, it's like, you know, like when he tells Jonah, I'm so, you know, like Jonah's mad at all
Right.
this. And that how Jonah doesn't have the right to be mad. Because he's not the creator, and God does what he wants, and if Jonah doesn't like it, tough luck.
And so the Lord said, tough luck, young man. But at the same time, God does, you know, just, he wasn't feeling comfortable with all that sun, so God sent a palm tree so that to cover it. And then when I think it was a snail or whatever, or a worm, killed the palm tree, he was angry. What are you going to? You got it for nothing? What are you complaining about? You know, so what else? What else do we
I think he was upset because the people listened, and he thought that they were all going to be punished, but they listened, and he was kind of disappointed.
That's right. Now, isn't that strange? Here's a human being who's going there to save the people, and yet, because God did not punish them, 40 days Nineveh will be destroyed. 40 days Nineveh will be destroyed. 40 days, only 3 days. And he was angry because they repented immediately and were converted. And yet, instead of being happy, he becomes angry and depressed. So in other words, God is definitely more understanding and loving than human beings.
I made me think of the gospel mass today, how the older brother and the younger brother and God giving and all that. And Jonah really felt that way.
That's right. And so he was angry. It was almost like...
You know, I also think that God uses, they may have prophet, you know, a special word for their mission, but they're human beings.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't absolve them from living the
Mistake.
human condition.
Absolutely.
And what I loved was, here he is, mad at God, and yet he was saved. But he didn't want the people to be saved. You know, he's mad at God, but not saying, oh yeah, I am them.
So he might have
Maybe he
been...
was a Pharisee.
He said, oh, thank you, Lord, for saving them. You know? Yeah, that could have been his reaction. Now, probably the origin of the story is that there was probably a Jewish prophet that fully realized that God's love was universal, and that God even loved the enemies